So when the shelter-in-place order came out last March, we were here in this 15-story office building, and if you'd been here that day, you would have seen me loading up my SUV with computer monitors and everything I needed to go work at home. Soon followed by pickup trucks loaded with computer monitors and everything else, files. By the next Monday, I had my basement at my house set up for our law firm. I emptied out toy baskets and turned them into trash cans. We set up a paralegal on each end of the ping pong table and had my law partner in the basement. I worked out of my closet, made that into an office, and you will recall that there was a toilet paper shortage at that same time. So for a while it was a bring your own toilet paper type situation, but we made it work. And one thing at that time, our server was not on the cloud, and so wherever our server was, our firm was, so we brought that to my house. And we didn't have a postage machine, so we brought that over, and it was kind of like Command Central for the next couple of months. The one thing it took a minute to figure out was how are we going to get our mail, because a lot of our mail gets delivered here at the Ficklin building, and we weren't supposed to be going in and out of anywhere. And that's how we worked until we slowly transitioned back. And we really made our staff a part of that conversation, like when they would feel comfortable riding the elevators and coming in again. And about the minute we got back, we moved over to a cloud system. We made sure that all of our staff had scanners and printers at all of their houses. So over the next several months, when we would go on our various quarantine periods, we were all ready. We could go home and start work, on a moment's notice and not have any downtime.
Well, when COVID started, we were all very shocked and confused, just like everyone else. And so we did the best we could to come up with ways to continue. I'm a real estate attorney, so to continue doing closings, just like we would without COVID, but in a safe way. So we stayed open. I'm at Martin Snow. And so most of our real estate department didn't go home at all. None of us worked from home, but I know some of our litigation department definitely did work from home. But when we decided what to do, we looked to CDC guidelines, we looked to what the governor was saying, what the Supreme Court of Georgia was saying as far as like the presence of the attorney at the closing table, which got interpreted to mean you could be present if you were on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams or a platform like that. And we looked to our title insurance companies because of course that's so important. When doing a closing, we have to make sure we can issue title insurance, and they were giving us a lot of information at the beginning of the pandemic. But taking all of that together, what we ended up doing, and I really kind of enjoyed it, was we moved our closing tables outside, and the weather was, if you remember, really nice. And so from about mid-March through June 1st, because then it got really hot on June 1st, we did our closings outside at 6-foot tables, and I would sit at one side of the table, and then we would have the buyer or the seller at the other side, and they'd come at separate times, and we would sanitize between their signings, and we would conduct the closings that way. We really wanted only essential signers to be there, but people were welcome to come stand, farther than 6 feet away from us, especially since we were outside. And eventually we did move inside just because it's Georgia and it got really hot, and so we came into the air conditioning. Mostly we were worried about, if we had anyone elderly coming to closing or people who may not be able to handle the heat out there, we wanted to accommodate. So we came inside, we would take temperature checks, we would all wear masks, and we continue to do that through the closings we're having today. But just trying to keep everyone as safe as possible. And real estate, while we are attorneys, we feel like it's customer service too. And so whatever anybody needs as far as what they're comfortable with, we're happy to adapt to. And so we'll just continue to do that as we keep learning more and more about this pandemic. We definitely did have people who would call us. Sometimes the day of closing and let us know that they had tested positive, and we would have to find ways to still safely get people closed. We would have window closings. So I did one of those with a couple where they had not gotten their results back yet, so we were not sure if they were positive or negative. And so we took the documents out to them, or I think we left them outside. They came and picked them up. They signed. I talked them through it on the phone, actually, through the window. And then they put them back in the box outside, and then we would let them sit. We'd spray them down with some sanitizer, and then we would handle them, but be very careful not to touch our eyes, faces, anything, and then wash our hands after and just try and be as safe as possible. And I felt comfortable with pretty much anything we were faced with. You know, we found a way to safely do those things.
So a couple of things happened. One, when everything kind of started hitting, our management committee pulled together and tried to decide whether we were going to send everybody home. If we were, what that was going to look like, and pulled our practice group leaders together, which I am one, and told us to get with our folks, figure out what they needed to work from home. And I've got to say, we did a really good job, and our people did a really good job, from assistants to paralegals, being able to sit down and say, to work from home on a day-to-day basis, I need a laptop, I need a printer, I need a scanner, whatever the case may be. And the course of probably 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, we managed to pull all that stuff together, get it organized and get it out and get people home, so we never really missed work time, so to speak. It worked out really well, and it surprised me how efficient everybody was. But again, it's a matter of just people coming together and saying, this is the way it's going to be for a little bit, and making it happen. There was a large discussion about what we were doing with our own clients and kind of their internal turmoil about how they were going to deal with working from home, what the government programs were going to look like, and then we're trying to answer it for ourselves as well. And I think the firm did a great job of kind of picking up and working as a team to make sure we met everybody's needs, both internally and externally. We've got at any time anywhere from probably 63 to 70 lawyers, over 100 employees between 3 offices actually, in Macon, Athens, and Atlanta. So yeah, there are resources there. We've got an IT director here in Macon and one in Atlanta that probably make the technological transition easier. And actually our IT director here in Macon, in kind of a moment of prescience moment last January, installed Zoom on everybody's computers before any of this stuff hit, and it started training us on how to use Zoom, because before that we had a couple of conference rooms in the Macon office and in the Atlanta office that had video conference technology, but we didn't have it on individual computers. And so we were well situated to kind of roll into everybody working from home. It took there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of admin staff. How do we deal with accounting? How do we deal with HR? Who can do what from where? And again, so you have that many moving parts. It's tough to kind of figure out who needs what and who has to be in the office versus who can be at home. And so it compounds the issues there. But you know, having that many brains working on the problem, working as a team, makes things easier too.
So the biggest effect on our practice area, which is helping people who are injured with claims against insurance companies, is that the constitutional right to a jury trial has been suspended, and we don't know when we're going to get it back. And so we are filing suits at a rate that I never have before. I filed 2 today, I'll file 2 tomorrow. I used to probably file 4 or 5 a month, and now I'm filing 5 a week, because right now, even in serious damage cases where there's really bad damage to the vehicle, if the person is not catastrophically injured, if their medical bills are less than $15,000, we're seeing about half the medical bills is what's being offered. And so they're taking a go sue me approach currently. And most of us, if we're ever in that situation, are going to be in a, what some people would call a more minor wreck of $15,000 in medical bills or $15,000 in medical bills or less, either us or if we hurt somebody. And so right now you're probably going to get sued if you get into a wreck and you don't, there's only $15,000 or less in medical bills, because the insurance companies can hold on to their money and make money on it. And so the insurance industry we're seeing holding on to that money, just taking a sue my insured approach so they can earn money on it. And the bigger effect on everybody's practice is going to be when the courts open back up and this flood of lawsuits that we've filed have to have a day in court. And that's going to affect everyone's practice. There has been a lack of ability to get medical treatment as much as we saw before COVID. Of course, some people are just flat scared to go. They don't want to go to the doctor unless they're dying in this situation. And it's taken longer and longer to get in for treatment. Insurance companies, of course, like to call this a gap in treatment, which I hope juries will understand when it comes to that point. But we've done everything we can to try to get good people treated, but you've got some even physical therapists who would work with them and maybe do virtual physical therapy even. But then you have other doctors that are just saying, nope, it won't work virtual. If you can't come in, too bad. And then there was a time, as you will recall, when they weren't seeing anybody, when they were completely shut down. On top of that, if I have a client who shows up with a fever, they're told to go home. So it might be just a random fever, nothing to do with COVID, but there goes their appointment.
COVID's greatest effect on real estate as a whole and on my business, which was affected just because of that, is the volume we experienced with closings. So March 13th, I remember that Friday because it was Friday the 13th. I'm not that superstitious, but right after that, everything shut down and interest rates were dropping, and there was definitely a lull while everyone was figuring out how to continue to show houses or buy houses and do different things during the pandemic. But once that got figured out, we saw a huge uptick in just the number of closings. People were ready to buy, lots of refinances just because the rates were so good and it was such a good time to do it. And we saw that continue on throughout the whole year and on into this year. So definitely something that affected us was the volume, and we learned how to just make our processes more efficient. And something else we saw is, these were trends prior to COVID, but we saw a lot more people wanting mail-away closing options. And so this isn't really anything that affects us legally, but it's just our day-to-day practical trying to get things closed. We had to work on, continuing to help accommodate mail-away closings. We got to practice a little bit with, I know, a House bill that I don't think it has gotten passed yet, but remote online notarization. The governor basically said that we could witness and notarize documents via platforms like Zoom, so long as the people were sitting in the state of Georgia, and it would still be a valid signature. We would still have been present for that signing. So we definitely used that some. And so just seeing those different trials for things that might come in the future, has been interesting during COVID times, since the governor was able to change the laws during the time of emergency that we're still in. We definitely struggled ourselves too as a larger firm, and like I said earlier, we pretty much looked just to what the CDC was saying, and we're in other as far as the legal field goes, just other, the governor, the Supreme Court of Georgia, and for real estate title insurance standards, so that we could incorporate those things into our practice area as best as possible. A lot of real estate firms in town were posting on social media their guidelines for what they were doing for closings. And a trend with the real estate agents is they like to take pictures at closings. So we were kind of able to see and get an idea of what other firms were doing, and we could kind of take from that what we liked or change it. An attorney in Warner Robins was doing drive-through closings because they had a tent and they had the space for that. We are fortunate at our Vineville office, our North Macon office, to have an overhang at the front, and so that was a good convenient spot to put our tables. If we didn't have that, we probably would have considered tents or something like that. But yeah, we kind of struggled with it too, trying to figure out the best way to do things, and we put all of our heads together as a firm and really as a real estate department for us, and we worked together. Everyone contributed, and what we decided worked for the North Macon office that has 2 of the real estate attorneys wasn't exactly what was going to work for the downtown office. Their conference rooms are actually a little bit bigger, so they were able to socially distance a lot better and go inside sooner. We, because our conference rooms were a little bit smaller, waited until we just couldn't bear the heat anymore before coming inside and starting to require masks inside. And at the start, we really only had authorized or the people who needed to sign coming in to the closings. And now it's a little bit more relaxed. Everyone does wear a mask, and we make an effort to socially distance and try and read the room to make sure everyone is comfortable. And as long as everyone is feeling comfortable, then we are too.
It's kind of a broad statement, but I'm a business litigator. I do business disputes, a lot of family business disputes, do agricultural litigation, do crop insurance defense work, pesticide, herbicide, drift cases, both on plaintiff and defense side, and then do some estate dispute work. The biggest change for me, excuse me, a lot of my cases come from outside of Bibb County. And so before the pandemic hit, I'd spend a day or 2 a week on the road meeting people. I work better when I can lay my hands on somebody, see a site, visualize things. They're just things that get lost in translation otherwise. And when the pandemic hit, kind of everything closed down. My ability to do that changed significantly. And so I was basically stuck in the office or stuck at home trying to do things by Zoom that normally I would do in person. And I'm still not comfortable with it. I think as things open back up and I've started to notice it a little bit, I'm going to go back to trying to be in person and be boots on the ground, so to speak, just because it works better for me. The other part of it is the smaller business clients I have started making a decision on matters they normally would have filed a lawsuit on to keep their powder dry, so to speak, and see if they needed that cash for something else rather than paying me to litigate on something that had already gone south. I use myself as an example, which I can't remember exactly when we shut down the office, but I had a mediation scheduled in a large wrongful death case that involved 8 or 9 different parties. We were supposed to be together in Augusta for about 3 days, the first week of April last year. And we ended up doing it by Zoom. And again, at that point, I'd only been using Zoom for about a month and a half, and trying to figure out how to share documents with the mediator or send a document that maybe hadn't been submitted to the mediator ahead of time to another party. It was an interesting process, and thankfully we had a kind of a third-party administrator that came in and handled that for us and made it easier. But after that mediation with 8 different parties, I kind of took a step back and said, "Oh, we can make this work. This can be done." And the next step was figuring out how to do depositions, share documents, put documents in front of deponent. And what we started off doing was I'd take all my exhibits individually, number them out, put them in individual envelopes, send them to the other side and to the court reporter, and I'd tell the deponent, open envelope number 2 when I got to that exhibit. And then we figured out how to share documents. And then court reporters got good enough where you just send the court reporter your exhibits, they would throw it up, they'd highlight what you needed to highlight, and it became easier. But that took probably 6 or 8 weeks and 8 or 9 depositions for me before we got to that point. Somebody here that tried an arbitration late last year via Zoom, had close to 400 exhibits, and the court reporter for that arbitration handled all the exhibits. And you could tell them, I need exhibit 230, they pull it up, they highlight what you want to highlight, it's recorded, it shows, it just worked really well. So for the most part, people kind of got used to it and figured it out. I think the hardest part was for some of our folks to close transactions, actually walking people through documents and staying on the same page as they were walking through documents via Zoom, so that they can then sign their signature page after they've read everything and you'd explained everything. But for the most part, people picked it up because they had to. Doing probate litigation and probate administration work, obviously notaries were an issue at the start of this, and getting 2 people or 3 people in a room was kind of an issue because nobody knew where the risk lay. And banks were closed, people going in person. And so how do we address that? The firm kept for a little while everybody else was home, about 10 people here, split between Macon and Atlanta, that were considered essential to day-to-day operations, and 2 of those people were notaries. And so what we started doing, even before some of the direction came out about how a notary could be in a different room or how you could witness electronically, we had a table that we would drag just outside our front door. Our notary would have a mask on, the person signing would have a mask on, and we'd be outside in the open air and would sign there. And we just made sure we had a notary here every day that we were open, so we could deal with that. And then as we started getting more direction on what was allowable and what was not allowable, it enabled us to get a little more flexible. But for a long time I was having clients that were just, because they weren't doing anything else, driving up here so they could use our notary.
Personally, I'm going to not do remote depositions as much after COVID ends. I like that it's an option now for the right situation, but it's been very frustrating. And then you add to that, internet trouble to where my client gets cut off mid-sentence when she was about to explain the rest. Now I'm stuck with that testimony. So I don't plan on using those past COVID.
Well, one adjustment we've made, and this is definitely just a hope of mine and something that I hope we'll see, is just one day it'll be safe to not have to wear our masks at the closing table. I really miss being able to see people's faces because I typically read people, I've learned, based off of their nonverbal cues. I can tell if I need to slow down or speed up, or maybe if it's a first-time home buyer, if they're confused, really well by looking at their face. And when they have a mask on, it's kind of hard to tell where people are and making sure they're understanding. So now I check in a lot. I'm like, are we all good? Are we understanding? I check in and make sure, but I'll look forward to the day when we can take our masks off and kind of get back to that, something that we took for granted before.
We've actually just now, for the longest time, any meeting we had that involved more than 3 people was done remotely, even if you were at your desk and somebody else was at their desk in the same building. As of yesterday, we had kind of our first back together partners meeting, and I'm starting to see practice group meetings get back together in the same room with more than 3 people at a time. So I think there's going to be a strong push for everybody to kind of get back in the same room with each other, just because, again, some things get lost in translation, and I don't know, I just like being in the same room with somebody that I'm talking to.
We had just moved over to a formal case management software right before COVID hit, and so that was useful. The software that what we had used before was something we had come up on our own, which essentially was just Outlook that could be shared with everyone in the organization. And so, we had just started using that and just started using it more. That was one of the very first things, is how do we still sign up clients? And so the very first phone call, I'm already asking them, like, if they have little kids, I know that they're gonna know how to use Zoom because their kids will be doing Zoom for school. And it's my favorite because you can screen share and show them the documents and go through your fee contract with them very well. But everybody's technological abilities are different. And so that very first phone call, I'm usually like, do you have an iPhone? Okay, no. Next thing, do you have Facebook? Almost everybody has Facebook. There's a video messenger feature in Facebook where you can, just like on FaceTime on iPhones, you can video call with Facebook, and that's worked great a couple of times. And then the other thing that we do is, we've started doing electronic signatures for people and just meeting them where they are with their technological needs. If we have to, we'll snail mail it, but very few people have wanted to come in right now. But we will, and we'll go to them too. It's just, most people have kind of having their distance right now. So virtual mediations, I like being there, but the great thing that I hope continues with virtual mediations is we're finally getting to see the adjusters. And so they're the ones that have the money to actually put on the case, but they can't travel from, distant states on every case. And so, but I have seen, even in the smallest cases, these adjusters will, come in for the opening statement on Zoom, and we can see them and they can see us. And, I think that makes a huge difference.
If you're the managing partner of a firm right now, this isn't something you would have ever thought you'd have to deal with. So we all kind of worked together and tried to figure out the best way to do it, because it was something that was puzzling to everybody. Technologically, maybe a lot of our attorneys have learned something. I definitely didn't use Zoom all that often before COVID, so I think we've all definitely learned how to use that platform, learned how to use Microsoft Teams, and gotten used to that, which it may be something, and I'm not sure on the litigation side, but maybe those platforms will continue to be used. And in real estate, I could see us using a similar platform as lenders start to move toward wanting, and borrowers start demanding more e-closings. I know a lot of states are working on that type of thing. I know Georgia really isn't quite there yet, but some lenders already are having borrowers e-sign a part of the loan package prior to closing, not any part that would need to be witnessed, notarized, or recorded, but they are having borrowers elect that option if they'd like it. So I think we'll continue to see more of that, and it will be important that we keep incorporating technology into our practice.
One of the major things we had to focus on, and again, thankfully we've got IT department and IT director who's very proactive and has been proactive with data security and protecting firm data assets and electronic assets. But when you take 70 or 100 people and ship them out to their homes, and they're on their own Wi-Fi systems and on home internet, the risk of some type of breach increases significantly. And so we've really had to step up our best practices and the practices we're using to protect our firm data and protect against breaches and things like that, which I think is true for everybody. I know we've been advising clients on how to do that a lot over the last year. And so it's made the need to do that much more acute, at least. Again, too, everybody's computer now has a webcam and Zoom. Everybody from really the front desk to Carter Bates. And so we have the ability to work remotely, meet remotely, much more effective at it than we were this time last year. And those have been the two major things that we really had to grow with.
I'm hoping we see a return to normal by Halloween of this year. And the best way that any of us can prepare is by staying flexible and knowing that we had the ability, when things went sideways, to do whatever it took to still keep the wheels turning. And so just being flexible and staying with it is so important. Now, for our practice in particular, we are anticipating a flood of litigation once the courts reopen, and being ready for that. All of these lawsuits that we've had to file, what we've done is we've preloaded our case files with trial materials. And so every single case when we file suit now is immediately prepped for trial with a trial notebook that is already prepared and a cloud file that already has the pretrial orders, the motions in limine we need, the jury charges, at least a start to every single file, so that on very little notice we can go to trial and do our part for getting those moving.
Well, my hope for the end of COVID, I'm excited that the vaccines are rolling out, maybe by fall. I'm not sure, maybe by the end of this year. Might be my dream of our maskless closings, but I see for in the future, as far as how COVID will affect real estate, I think as we search titles and pull title searches for, maybe someone's going to sell after they bought something during 2020, we may see some issues because there have been big gaps in recording due to COVID. No real fault of the clerk's office. They had to work with skeleton crews at first. They, many of them, I don't know, some may not be completely back to full staff. I'm just not sure. Some of the offices had to shut down due to COVID, so I know that happened at least twice, I think, in Bibb County. And so we'll have to see. I'm worried that we may see liens that were filed that didn't come back in a title search that are going to be filed in the gap that before the warranty deed and the security deed are filed. And title insurance is worried about that too. So they've communicated with us lots of measures in which to try and prevent that. We always update our title right before the closing, but we can only do what we can do as far as that gap goes. So I think we'll see some possible title issues or maybe some title insurance claims from this time. Another issue are any foreclosures that have happened in 2020. So I'm starting to get some titles in where we see that a foreclosure happened in 2020, and the title insurance companies are really wary about that too. And so government-backed loans, I think it's the CARES Act that kind of controls all of this. They want us to make sure if it was a government-backed loan that the house was vacant. And I don't have all the regulations memorized, but probably during the period of notice and definitely during when the foreclosure happened. And so we're all going to have to modify. It may involve foreclosure attorneys recording an extra affidavit with their foreclosure, with their deed under power that explains the CARES Act was completely complied with, because we're having to go back right now and talk to those attorneys and figure out, okay, what can we put of record to satisfy our title company to show that even though this federally backed loan was foreclosed on, everything was done properly. Because right now they don't want to insure unless we go and dot all the I's and cross all of the T's. And so it's making those type of closings take just a little bit longer because more is involved right now.
In terms of the post-COVID legal landscape, to some extent, Zoom depositions, even Zoom arbitration will continue when you've got clients or attorneys or arbitrators that are spread out across the country, long distances where travel doesn't make sense. But at the same time, I do think you're going to see people start getting back face to face as soon as they can, just because there's so much inherent value in just being able to sit across the table from somebody and discuss a case, discuss a resolution, discuss discovery issues. There's just something to being face to face that I need, at least. In terms of practice areas and things like that, I'm interested to see if there's an increase in mediation and arbitration going forward, because I keep hearing, and I've heard it both locally and in other places in the state, that courts and jury trials may be backlogged for at least another 3 years just because of the number of criminal trials that have to be tried. And so on the civil side, I've got clients that aren't going to wait that long. They're going to look for some other creative way to resolve their dispute and move on. And mediation and arbitration offer that. One of the things that this year has been good for, two things. One is, as a leader in a firm, manager of a firm, I don't think it matters if you've got a one lawyer firm with a paralegal assistant. It's proven to me that as a manager, as a leader, you have to lay your hands on people in some way or another. You have to check on them. You have to make sure that they understand why you're doing what you're doing and why they're doing what they're doing, and make sure they have what they need to be successful. And again, when you send everybody home, that was much more important because they're not here face to face on a daily basis. And so I hope that will continue. I'm trying to continue that, even though we're all back together. The second thing is, over the last year, I've done some kind of hard looking at where can I grow my practice, what practice niches are growing that maybe I need to be able to fill to serve my clients better, and try to take a much more active role in learning those areas so I can offer more services to my client in those areas.